What's going on, guys? So, today we're going to be having a look at the new free-to-play game Genshin Impact, but a super quick disclaimer beforehand. I haven't finished this game 100% yet, and I will explain why later, but I have played between 40 to 60 hours, and the opinions in this video are also purely my own. If you don't agree with them, that's fine. Let me know what you think in the comments. So, my first impressions, upon opening the game, you get this very free-to-play looking sort of intro slide, almost like a mobile game. It kind of put me off a little bit, but then immediately upon starting the game, you get this cutscene, and it is beautiful. Like, this game, no denying, this is a stunning game. You get these cutscenes with things going on, there's fighting, and honestly, it is one of probably the best looking games I've seen in the past 10 years. It's truly that stunning at times. The voice acting as well is decent for I want to say it's a JRPG. It's obviously got its inspiration from Japanese and or Japan, I should say, and stuff like that, related games. So for the English voice acting, it's pretty decent. I've seen worse. And then also immediately you get this idea of these varied areas, like, you know, from the very start you're up in the sky, 5 minutes later you're down on the floor. So that was my first impression of purely the first sort of 20 minutes. It is extremely varied, extremely beautiful, and voice acting pretty decent, and hopefully, well, we'll go into a bit more. The story seems pretty promising. So, the story, and in this section I'm also going to go through kind of how I felt and the things I noticed as I was noticing them playing through the story. So, it's not just going to be a rundown of the story, it's going to be a bunch of information in there as well. So, the story starts pretty interesting. A brother and sister are in this, the best I can describe, this other place. It's almost like in the sky, in the clouds, and one of you gets taken and kind of locked up by this bad guy, and then you get to pick if you want to play as a boy or a girl. So if you pick the girl, the boy will be taken, and vice versa. The start of the story doesn't make too much sense. So because your brother and sister gets taken, you kind of get told in little cutscene type text things that you need to basically find this godlike person in order to help. Doesn't make a ton of sense, but it seems pretty cool, I guess. And then you hop into the actual gameplay. So after these cutscenes, you're straight in with this kind of tutorial starting couple of minutes. It feels very Breath of the Wild at times, and that is a big thing that people have been saying, that this is just a Breath of the Wild clone. It isn't. Let me just point that out now. It is not a Breath of the Wild clone, but I do notice elements from it. So, for example, you can climb any surface, and it has a stamina meter, just like Breath of the Wild. There's also swimming that is very similar in terms of if you run out of stamina, you just immediately drown. And then there's also the glider, which, I mean, this is chopped straight out of Breath of the Wild with the whole wind uplift and everything like that. But other than that, that is pretty much where the similarities end, and that's a good thing. I think it's important to take away the little things from good games. You know, for example, you see games using the kind of Call of Duty first-person shooter aspects, but then it makes it its own, so that's fine. There is also frame dips really frequently. Like 5 seconds after starting and moving, I was like, wow, okay, there's definitely some frame and stabilization issues. Wasn't bad enough though to turn me off the game, you know. It wasn't Fallout 4 levels of jumpiness, so that's good. You also get sort of introduced to the moves fairly early on, so you have like special moves and like ability move, and then standard attacking moves. And these are really the bread and butter of this game. They are so fluid and so expertly done, and they flow together. It is really good. Better than, and I will say this now, better than anything Breath of the Wild does in terms of combat. So, hate on me for that one. There are also a couple of niches and a couple of issues, so having to pick up kind of every item separate does feel clunky. It would be nice if when you was looting a chest that has maybe 4 items in it, that you could pick them all up at once. That would be a lot better than having to pick up one, kind of wait for the menu to go down, and, you know, it takes a lot of time, but it's kind of more of a critique rather than a major issue. There's also cooking in this game. Again, something you learned fairly early on, but I thought I'd talk about it now when I'm talking about other Breath of the Wild aspects. So, in Breath of the Wild, you can kind of throw together different food ingredients and see what happens. On this game, it's a little bit simpler. You will learn recipes, and if you have the right ingredients, you can cook. If you cook a certain number of each food item perfectly, you can then auto cook from there. A food has a ton of benefits, as you would expect. Stamina increase, damage, health boosts, health regen, stuff like that. So it is a useful tool, and I don't think anyone can say that it copied off anything, because any exploration game nowadays has that cooking aspect. And after I experienced all this kind of stuff in a fairly short space of time, maybe within 30 to 40 minutes, the simple tutorial seemed to be gone, and a dragon suddenly attacks the city just as you arrive, which is coincidental to say the least. You kind of arrive, oh no, there's a dragon, everyone's running away. That's fine, they're moving the story along. And this was actually a really epic moment. I'm not going to lie, it didn't make a whole ton of sense how coincidental it was, but seeing this massive dragon fly over, it was pretty cool, I will say that. Then you meet a bunch of people one after another, and it's like the game just kind of throws information in your face. It's, here you go, here's this person can do this, and then here you go, here's another person. This other person can do something completely different, but it is a lot to take in. So you go to these headquarters, and like I say, there's always people, and you want to help stop the dragon. And because you're a good guy or girl, whichever one you choose, you say, yes, I'm going to help stop this dragon, even though I'm here to find my sister, but we're going to stop the dragon instead. And then after some smaller moments in the story, you go to what is called the Temple of the Four Winds. And these temples are basically like dungeon areas where there's a certain amount of exploration, and you might have challenges. We'll talk about that a bit more later. But in this first dungeon, we see our first elemental reaction. And this is fire, or pyro, I believe it is in this game. And this is an element that can basically burn through shields. So if an enemy has a shield, you can shoot it, and over time, it'll burn the shield. Nice little idea. And then other wooden objects as well can be destroyed, such as boxes and crates and all that. Anyway, in this dungeon, we see a nice element of the combat and puzzle challenges. So you, in these dungeons, have either exploration based challenges, so simply get from A to B, maybe fly across an area. Then there's challenges that are combat based, so defeat a number of enemies within a certain amount of time. And then there's puzzle challenges, they can vary, light a couple of bonfires, stuff like that. It seems pretty cool, if not simple. It does kind of feel, and I will compare it to Breath of the Wild, because that's a game everyone reckons it's like. In Breath of the Wild, you do have a more variety type of challenge, maybe get a ball to go across here with an ice-based move. Here it is a bit simpler, but still definitely gets the job done. Then after the first sort of initial few missions, you do get to start to really explore the world, and you notice immediately there's huge areas, and there's an absolute shit ton to do in these areas. Every 5 seconds you look around and, oh, there's another chest that's locked, you have to do something, and oh, there's another one, and it is really good. And at the start of the game, and I will put little asterisks in there, at the start, okay, bear that in mind, the game doesn't hold you back at all. Like, you want to go anywhere, you want to do something, you do it. It feels amazing. There's no real level obligation to do certain things. It's just, yeah, you want to go to that mountain, you go to that mountain, and I'm not going to stop you, and that's great at the start. Then shortly after, we're introduced to Cryo, or Ice, and this is in the next temple, and as you would guess, there's 4 temples, because it's the Temple of the 4 Winds, so it's not just one wind in this world, there's 4 separate winds. And with this ability, or this element, you can basically freeze enemies in water. Pretty cool, it's as you would expect. Then after that, after sort of venturing for a little while, I did notice a few boss fights as well. I actually stumbled across a boss that I was way too underleveled for, but it was cool to see that they're just out in the world, and it does kind of give you the ability to attack them whenever you want. If you're high enough skilled, you can dodge plenty and you can take them on. It doesn't stop you, and that is what I really enjoyed. However, at this point I started to notice a few little cracks. So I noticed that you can only level up to level 20 at the start on each character. I will discuss this a bit more later, but for now I remember my initial thoughts were, well, why can I only go to level 20? That seems a bit rubbish, but I will talk about that more in depth later. I also noticed that the world has such a variety of puzzles, so there's stuff like ghost-like creatures, where if you follow these creatures, they'll lead you to chests. There's also puzzles where you maybe have to shoot 5 different things flying in the air that are scattered, or light braziers or bonfires, stuff like that. It was very varied in the actual world, and I really enjoyed it. There are a couple of issues though. So the big one for me was some tutorials are so overbearing and damn right frustrating. So after you explore a new area and see a new mob or enemy or whatever, a little thing at the bottom of your screen will come up saying, you know, press this button combination to learn more. And you think to yourself, well, I don't want to learn more right now. I kind of want to learn more maybe later, but as of right now, I'm fine. But it won't disappear until you physically enter that menu. And at times I found myself just entering the menu just for the sake of entering it. It was like, oh, well, it's told me to, so I'll enter the menu to quickly quit out. It was very stressful, but I kind of understand why. I also don't feel like you should have to go into a menu and settings menu to turn it off. I feel like it should have just not been as overbearing, maybe be on a timer, but it was a minor thing, I suppose. And then we get to use electric or shock ability, which again is exactly as it sounds, and this is when it starts to really focus on the different elements and combinations of them elements. So for example, water, if it's shot at a fire enemy, it vaporizes, so it isn't very effective. But if you use ice, it will hurt fire, because I'm guessing it's a stronger reaction overall. But there's stuff like electric can affect water, so it can kind of electrify the water if there's enemies in there, and a ton more. Each element has its best against and its worst against, almost like Pokemon, you know, when you want to use a fire type move against a grass type enemy, stuff like that. A little bit more in depth than that though, but it is really cool, and that is again one of the major things about this game. But this game does so well. It's all the different elements of enemies compared to your elements, and it's what are you going to pick to kind of counter their element with your own. It's really good. Then on from there, and it may sound like I'm talking a lot, but there is a lot to discuss in terms of story, even as silly as it is. So, after beating the last of the 4 temples in the story mission, the wind in the world at this point had gone kind of loopy. Just suddenly goes back to normal. I'm guessing everything's fine now. You've defeated 4 temples. The game can go back to being the game. You do have to get a gliding license though. So this was kind of a side mission type thing. But in the game, to glide in towns, you need a gliding license, which was so silly, but kind of charming at the same time. So to get this, you have to go to one of the characters you meet and do a certain number of things and challenges, and afterwards they go, well, here you go, now you can legally fly. It was a fun little thing to do, but it was, like I say, very silly in order to get, considering everyone had been flying around for like an hour now, but that's fine. It was pretty cool, I suppose. And then what I noticed was my first real look at one of the cutscenes. So other than the initial cutscene, there wasn't any major, but there was one cutscene that really stood out. It was almost like a comic book style Japanese comic type cutscene. This blew me away, honestly. This was the best bit about this entire game for me, just watching this cutscene. So you meet someone called Venti, which is what we don't know yet, but she's actually a god, or he's a god. And this is when we get this cutscene, and they're singing, and it's beautiful. It is really beautiful. It's like looking at stained glass windows moving. It is that good. And then the first act finishes. So you do a bunch of quests, and the first act finishes, and it comes up on your screen. And now the game basically says, right, well now there's more stuff to do in the world and more side quests. Go do them. Don't come back till you've done them. And that's fine, because at the time you're like, well, I want to explore. You know, I want to see what this world has to offer. So you maybe spend 5 to 10 hours just exploring, just doing your thing. And then you continue with the story, and the story goes like this. So, there's basically a red crystal that we picked up earlier, and they're now examining it, and we're told that somehow we're special, and we get made an honorary knight after doing basically nothing. But it's like, right, fair enough, we're not a full knight, I can kind of see why. And then we have to follow this person that we saw in green earlier, and again, we get another really good scene. And I can't express how good these specific scenes are. Bear that in mind. Not every scene, but these are really cool. And then it turns out, as you would probably expect just by playing this game and seeing it, but the crystal is actually a teardrop apparently, and we have the ability to purify it. It kind of makes us wonder what makes us so special. You know, we've not been told that we're different in any way, but quite easily suddenly we have these new powers. It seems weird, but intriguing at the very least. And then blah blah blah, a bunch more story stuff happens that is not important in any way, shape or form. And then there's the obligatory stealth mission, which is, and I will say this in all confidence, the most needless, boring piece of shit in this entire game. This game has been designed on fluid combat and exploration. So for the game to suddenly turn around and be like, okay, we know you like the combat and the fluidness of the game, but now you're going to have to do a really boring 1 hour long stealth sequence where you're sneaking around and trying to distract a couple of guards to get from one end of a small room to another. It was like, well, it's took away from my experience so much. I wanted to experience the game as it was, and now I'm being forced to sneak around. This isn't what I wanted, but I thought, well, I can let the game off, I suppose. It is only one time. But it's not. The next hour is also incredibly boring, so it basically comes to as much as walk somewhere to talk to someone. And you think, right, okay, and then you've got to do it again. So you walk somewhere else and talk to someone, and again, and again, and then you come to a tavern, and this is what really made me laugh. You walk into the tavern as part of this thing to talk to someone, and then you immediately, in order to get the next part of the quest, have to walk out of the tavern, meaning a loading screen, to turn around, to walk back into the tavern to see another loading screen to be able to get the new quest. What? It didn't make any sense. Why couldn't I have just picked it up when I was in there? It's little things like that that really start to crack in this game. Anyway, we receive an item that was stolen from a dungeon, apparently, and you get a pretty new cool character to use and a cool kind of boss fight, and that's the most I can say. The character was nothing special, but it's always nice to be able to use more characters with more abilities. And then the thing we had to get in this stealth mission was called the Lyre, which is kind of a harp or a mini harpsichord. And after receiving the Lyre, it's actually damaged, and we repair it. And then we have to do another boring thing where we have to go and collect 3 things. And it's just like, the game just like, look, there's 3 things we need. Go collect them 3 things. It makes no sense. I don't understand why, but we do it anyway, you know, it's part of the quest. We then rejoin the group that we'd all become best friends with now and use yet more crystals to repair this lyre to its full power. And now we're going to use it to summon Storm Terror or something like that. The story at this point goes off the rails as a lot of JRPGs do. We all meet on a cliff because apparently that's the best place to meet, is on a cliff. And what can I say at this point? It turns out the dragon's being manipulated by a bad guy, and this bad guy just kind of appears and he's like, it was actually me all along. But it's not a special bad guy, and this was annoying. It's just a standard bad guy you see throughout the world. Why couldn't they have maybe designed it to be even slightly different, have the same design, but maybe just be slightly special in some way? But it's not, and that just kind of comes off as cheap to me. But it's like, right, fair enough, bad guys manipulating dragon, and the dragon destroys the lyre. Yet again, it's like, oh no, this is like the 12th time this has happened. Who would have seen that coming? And then we see that the ice guy is actually working for your sister. Or is he? I don't know, because it's been so long since the start of the game, like 10, 15, 20 hours at this point, it's hard to tell actually what your sister looked like. So it could be a sister, it could also be just a random blonde haired girl. Who knows at this point? It doesn't make that clear in any way, shape or form. And then you hit a wall in the game. So you can't progress at this point until you're a high enough level, and this was awful. Considering the game let you be so open at the start, to then be like, look, no, we're just not going to let you advance till you just walk around the world and open a bunch of chests. I understand having a level limit, you know, maybe if it said recommended level 18, and had given you the option to maybe try it at a lower level, that would have been much better. At least then you've got the choice to really dish it out or not. But then you get to this adventure rank 18, which I will talk about more later, and you meet up with Diluc and a bunch of others. So Diluc is this fire-based guy, and the others are just a bunch of other kind of pointless characters. And then we decide we have to take down this Abyss Mage, which was the ice thing controlling the dragon. And at this point, I'll be honest, the story just went out the window. And I say that in the nicest way. The story was so string thin. Like, it really tried to get you to think, well, yeah, there's actually more here than meets the eye. But there's not. It is really barren. And that's fine, I guess. The story had gone crazy long before this. But it was at this point where I was like, well, this kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay. And then after doing some simple puzzles around the kind of world and area, you go back to confront Storm Terror, the big dragon thing. And the story really tries to let you know here that it's actually about freedom and friendship and loyalty. And I know this because literally every character has this kind of monologue where they're like, oh yes, I did this all for freedom, and then one's saying, well, I did it all for loyalty and courage. And it's kind of like, well, hold on, you know, don't go soppy on me now. It gets kind of awkward and cringy. And then he defeats Storm Terror with actually a pretty cool on-rail shooter. And by using Venti, the bard we met earlier, it is a little bit stale, but it is a nice change of pace to have this on-rails bit and then you suddenly go to a floor and have to kind of shoot the weak points. It's fine. I'm not going to say much more about it than that. It's a nice enough addition. And then after a fight we have a cutscene that ends way too abruptly. Like, here you go, this is the kind of main thing you've been told to do all game. Then we suddenly get this cutscene and it's just boom, we're back to town. And after we're just talking to Amber that we met at the very start and we find out the town was actually attacked. And at this point I'm like, well, I thought we kind of finished the story here. I completely forgot about my sister, but I thought, well, fair enough. So we talk to Amber and tell her that we are going to finally try and find our sister. So it makes me think, well, what was the point of helping find Storm Terror if your sister's got taken? But, hey, so after telling her we're going to go find our sister, we do a couple more small tasks, and an evil woman, the best I can describe it, comes and attacks you in Venti. And at this point, and I obviously will be showing clips of it, the frame rate absolutely tanks in this cutscene. From this point on, this game struggled, really struggled, and you'll see it. This isn't my recording, this is purely, I felt like I was going 5 frames per second, it was that bad. But I kind of got over it, and I refreshed my game a couple of times. It seemed to help a little bit, I guess. But at this point, it did feel like the story was at its natural conclusion. And I say this because the story had such a lack of rigidity throughout it. You know, it kind of moulded itself how it wanted, rather than sticking to an actual cohesive story. But at this point, it just feels like the game has ended. But then it expects you to level up a shit ton and do the next mission, which is weird. I get we're trying to find our sister, but at this point I'd played, maybe 50 hours? Something like that. And 50 hours in, most games come to a conclusion, and I don't mind a game having a ridiculous amount of story. But the game itself was so choppy in terms of how it told it. At this point I was like, well, you know what, I'm kind of done. I don't really want to play much more story. And I would have done if I didn't feel like I was forced to level up. So the world, as I've said before, has an absolute ton to do. And at the start of the game, specifically, it felt so incredibly open. But as you kind of progress, and later on, the world just seems to close off, as in these temples you find around are locked at certain levels, which I understand. But then when you just start running into areas that clearly were just thrown in for the sake of expanding the world, it really starts to wind you up. And the fact that I need to level up so highly, not just 1 or 2 levels, but a ridiculous amount to be able to access half the content in the game, really shows its free-to-play nature. However, then there's good points, because there is such a variety of world challenges as mentioned before, and some of them are simple, defeat 25 enemies in 30 seconds, and some more tricky, you know, find specific bonfires and braziers sort of hidden on trees and underground. That's really cool, and it always feels like there is at least something to do, even if it feels tacked on and thrown in at times. The fact that you're never more than 5 to 10 seconds away from more content is fun. And again, the issues then arise from this, because when you do side quests, some are so boring and so utterly ridiculous. There's literally a side quest where a maid expects me to clean up 5 stains on the floor of a mansion, and I can't help but think about this is literally the thing you're getting paid for. Why am I, someone that's taken down a dragon, expected to do this? And it's almost you have to do it, because if you don't, then your rank won't go up. And I understand why some quests have to be a bit more dull compared to others. But then for them to throw in great quests, like the cooking one, where you meet this new woman and you go on this crazy hour and a half long adventure where you find this priceless ancient boar that you get its meat and you use it in a cooking competition, and you're like the sous chef, the sidekick of the main chef, and you have to make little entrees and stuff. It was a really memorable quest, more memorable than 90% of the other story missions. And there is so much variety in the actual open world as well. You walk to some areas and then mountain areas, and then there's kind of a frosted area, and then high up cities in the sky areas and underground areas. There's so much variety, and it makes it feel utterly amazing when you explore these worlds. And then you can talk to NPCs, and you can acquire recipes and other loot items through the NPCs. Even though that it can be a bit annoying having to slog through and lumber through all this conversation just to hopefully get a tiny reward, it is a nice little touch, because not all games do it. However, a big issue, and probably the biggest issue about this whole open world ordeal, is the fact that the towns feel barren and dead. Now, in the first town they come to, they try and explain that because of the dragon, loads of people have fled and aren't there anymore. And I think, well, okay, that makes sense why there's only like 10 people in this massive town. But every other town is the same. There is like no population in these. And I don't think it would have been that hard to just render in groups of people, because some of these towns are huge, ginormous, like the size of other entire open world games. But this game absolutely squanders the opportunity to make places feel lived in, and it is a real shame. Now, something people may or may not know about me, I have a ton of qualifications in music, so I'm often extremely picky when it comes to the general game ambience music and soundtracks. I can say though, in this game, the music in general is often pretty incredible. Unfortunately, I can't actually play any due to the fact that I don't want to get in trouble by showing any specific soundtracks, but you can check it up on YouTube, no problem. But the game music has these soft undertones at times in sad moments or more emotional moments, and then these swelling orchestral tones at these epic battle moments. However, at times, the music just feels out of place, like it's in the wrong scene in a film. Sometimes I'll be in a fight and the music will be so sort of quiet and mellow, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm killing things here, I'm defeating big enemies, surely there should be a bit more. And then there's also vice versa, where the music is so overpowering considering I'm just walking around. It's a weird in-between, but overall I am extremely impressed by the general music in this game, and I think a lot of games could really learn a thing or two. So the leveling in this game is actually awful, like really awful, and the character leveling and world leveling, everything terrible. I will say that, and that is what lets this game down. I've stopped playing this game twice now because of this very feature, and I'm going to try my best to explain it and then tell you why. So the leveling goes like this. So each character has a personal level up to level 20. Then you can ascend each character, meaning you go from level 20 and then you can work your way to level 40, and so on every 20 levels up to level 100, I believe. Now, you think about it like this though, if you're having to use in this game books, which aren't the hardest thing to get but can be tricky, to level up a character up to level 20, on each character, and let's say you use 4 characters primarily, so that's 4 characters that you've got to get to level 20, then ascend, which usually takes special ingredients or resources to do. It's not particularly easy in order to do that, and if you're doing it on each character, it's going to be a struggle. And then on top of that, there's an adventurer rank, and this is leveled up from doing quests, opening chests, general tasks, side quests, whatever, and this is required to progress any story missions. If you want to progress story mission, you physically have to go and just open like 100, 200 chests in order to get the 1 or 2 levels you need. And that is awful. It's really wound me up. And then on top of that, there's personal weapon and charm upgrades. So the weapon leveling might go like this. I have a sword. I need to put a certain amount of resources towards it to level it up to level 2, 3, whatever. This, I will admit, is pretty cool, because if you have a really good sword or a really good bow and arrow, and you have a bunch of spares, a bunch of low common grade ones, you can use them to sort of infuse with the main one to level it up. And that was cool. However, the actual rest of it wasn't. Like, just to level up, I have to physically tap my R2 button like 200 times. Like, if I'm leveling up my character, for example, I have to keep tapping R2. I can't just do an autofill and manually get the max XP. I have to keep tapping and tapping and tapping and tapping. What the hell is going on? Why is it like that? I really don't know. It's really bad game design. And then on top of that, okay, so on top of the weapon level and everything else on the multiple characters and leveling up 7 different categories for each character after leveling up the character, there's also a world level. And this is a level that you rank up to level 1 when you get to adventurer rank level 20. If that sounds confusing, it's because it is. So you have to get to 1 level in order to be able to unlock a new level on a new level. And that is just stupid. And this upgrades the enemies around the world to make them harder. You get more bosses, stuff like that. And the characters overall, I mean, they're cool, and that's why it's such a shame. They are cool, but most of them have to be required from microtransactions. And I get it's a free-to-play game, I get that. But you get your character, you get Amber, which is the fire shooter, you get Mona, which is the electric user, and then you get one more, can't quite remember. And other than that, it has to be through microtransactions, which we will talk about later on a little bit more. Then there's also another upgrade related thing, which is in the constellations, and these are like upgrade trees, but they're so difficult to level up and are basically pointless. You level them up with these legendary artifact things that you get from only boss fights, okay? And one of them is required to level up, but all it gives you is like 10% increase in the range of an ability. It's just tackled on. It's like they've gone, right, let's just add more things, yeah, that'll do. It didn't need it. It hasn't had it the entire game, so just throw it in there for the sake of it. It was stupid. And the very last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of characters is Paimon, your sidekick. Is the most annoying little bitch I've ever seen in a game. Always talking in third person. She's always there going, oh, you know, Paimon said this and Paimon said that, and I'm like, no, she fucking didn't, mate. Just shut up. You know, she's always interrupting. It's annoying. It's bad story. I can't physically express how much that character alone wound me up. And you haven't even got the option to turn her off. She's just there all the time, and it's not worth it. And it may sound like I'm ranting about this bit, but that's because I am. Because in RPG, the most important thing is your character and level development. And the fact that they messed it up so easy in this game is absolutely absurd to me. So there are a bunch of general game issues and just other things that didn't really fit into a category. So that's what this section's going to be. I'm just kind of going to read them off as I've written them down and explain a bit more. So, you can dispatch party members on expeditions for rewards, but this is so meaningless you may as well not. So you can, any party members you're not using, maybe you've got 1 or 2 through microtransactions in the way of wishes, which again I'll talk about in a moment. If you're not using them, you can send them on expeditions, but you can get like, if you send them out for 24 hours, you might get 10 raw meat. That's something I could get in 5 seconds in the overworld, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. I suppose it does give a use to the unused party though. The frame rate as well struggles so badly in new areas. I was going to new areas and unlocking them, and then my PC, PS4, whatever you're playing on, it will tank. It absolutely will. And the fact I had to refresh in order to solve this was a bit annoying, but it could be worse, and I think with a couple of updates and patches that could be fixed a little bit. There was also a couple of issues with my map where I just couldn't use it. I would open a map and I couldn't select anything. I had to then quit the game and go back in. Again, very annoying. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to mention it again, leveling up is so tedious having to press the buttons over and over and over again. Then there's just some things about the game as well. So the game sort of takes some mobile game elements, as in daily logins, there's like multiple currencies. I understand it's a free to play game though, so I was kind of fine with this because I didn't have to spend anything on the game, so it's fair enough. Saying I didn't have to though, I did pre-order the game, spent a tenner, and I didn't get my pre-order bonuses, which was a bit annoying because I wanted them. I think it was like a set of wings and a day's early access. I got none of that, and the issue is now, if I was to get that reward now, I've kind of burnt myself out in the game, so it'd be kind of pointless. So that was a downside. I feel like I wasted a tenner. The Battle Pass as well is in here, but this is the weirdest and probably the worst attempt to put in a Battle Pass into a game I've ever seen. So the Battle Pass is just a standard one, you know, as most are. There's a sort of free version and there's a paid version, but it unlocks at such a high level. Like, I unlocked the Battle Pass 50 hours into my game, which, imagine playing a game for 50 hours and then being able to unlock the chance at more microtransactions. It's really weird, really weird. And I get this game is going to be a games as a service, but I don't know. I'll probably talk about that a bit more later, but it was really weird that it was at such a high level. And then the last thing is just one or two of the challenges in the world are absolute bullshit and like physically almost impossible without over leveling like crazy. There was one in particular where I had to kill, you know, I don't know, 15 enemies in 30 seconds, or no, sorry, 15 enemies, and I wasn't allowed to have more than 15 seconds between each kill. And they started off simple. I was using the right element against these ice guys, and then at the end, like 3 big guys come, and I found it physically impossible to not kill one, but to kill all 3 within, you know, 15 seconds. Absolutely ridiculous. It is so hard. I had to power level my characters to like Ascension 2 or rank 40 or whatever. These enemies were like rank 15, and it was that much of a struggle. So I don't know if it was just in that one little area there was that little bug. I don't know, but they were still issues. My final thoughts and verdict on this game. I think people might disagree, but also might agree. I don't know. I'm not you. Who knows? The game has so much potential, like so much, and it is clearly a games as a service kind of game. You know, it's got times where you'd complete a quest and at the bottom it will say to be continued, and you look at it and go, oh, okay, so they're probably going to expand this quest line in future, and that's great. And it's a game that isn't meant to be played through, I'm guessing, in a week. And if you're one of these people that only plays an hour or 2 a day, this game might take you months to complete, and that's fine. You know, you're going to get more than you use out of it. But for someone like me that really likes story-driven games, and this tried to make itself one, it fails at a lot of hurdles. However, you've also got to think it's free to play. It costs £0 for people to play. You know, and that alone has to go into your thinking on if it's good or not. If I paid £60 for this game, I would be giving it a lower score and be more ridiculing of it. However, I paid, you know, or I could have paid nothing, and I would have got the exact same experience. The game does need bigger updates and bigger, better quest lines and more epic things throughout the game, and a lot of these minor bugs need fixing. I get that nowadays games aren't full and, you know, proper when they come out. They take like 5 updates to be even considered a game, but yeah, it is an issue at the moment, and they really, I think, within the next week or 2 need to get on it, or I can see a lot of people dropping off, because this could be cool. There is a co-op mode that I didn't try, but that could be really cool, running around with your friend on co-op and everything, but then with the frame rate the way it is, you would be absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. And the game does take a lot of elements from Breath of the Wild, but it is in no way, shape or form a clone like people say. Yet, it's like that point now where anything that looks aesthetically similar to something else, oh, it's a clone. You know, Fortnite comes out, and then any other game now that's colourful, people are, oh, well, that's a Fortnite clone. This isn't. Yes, it looks kind of similar, and there are the 2 or 3 small elements that are similar. But other than that, I mean, the combat is a million times better. It really is. And so many other things that are so good and well done in here. So when people say it's a Breath of the Wild clone, it absolutely isn't. And the game just overall tries to be its own thing, and it gets so close to being it. It gets so close to being Genshin Impact, a stand-alone masterpiece. But instead, it's like Genshin Impact, the game that could have been great, but at the minute really isn't. And the issues, like I say, and I will keep coming back to frame rate, because if this doesn't get fixed, people aren't going to play this game. The frame rate's terrible. I was getting down to like the low 20s, even under 10 FPS, and then the level capping absolutely ruins it. Reduce or even remove half of these leveling things. Just give us a personal character level and then a world level as well, if that's what you want to increase the enemies. But as it is at the minute, having 5, 6, 7 different leveling options, it makes it so complicated and lets it down. And again, the game is free to play, but more optimization needs to be put into it. And I feel like without the tedious leveling, and with another month or two of optimization, this could have been special, really special. Look, as it stands, it's not going to win Game of the Year, but for me, it does more than enough to warrant a playthrough for anyone. Anyone watching this, if you have a PS4 or even a phone, a mobile phone, as they say, if you have a phone, you can go and download it absolutely free and get all the same content. It's amazing, and that is what this game does well, the fact that it's free. With it being a free bundle, people might be put off and might say, well, I don't play free-to-play games. It is worth it, trust me, and you're going to get hundreds of hours out of it. I only got my amount of hours out so far. I will absolutely finish the game in time, but for now, I'm going to wait for the issues to suppress. But as I say, the game is really good, and it is so close to being great. But as it is at the minute, I could only give it, if I was to give it a ranking, either a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. It's worth a play, but it's not worth buying a battle pass, buying characters, buying this, buying that for the game, unless this was a game you adored. Look, if you guys enjoyed this video, as always, drop a like, subscribe, whatever. I'll see you guys next time.